Tunnel of Snow. It was winter time on the island of Sodor. Snow lay everywhere, and the railway looked like it was covered under a large white blanket. At Titmouth Sheds, the engines were all getting ready for work. Their fires were all lit up, and they were soon making steam ready to go. The Fat Controller came to see the engines. "I want you all to be careful while you are out there today," he warned the engines. "There is snow near the tracks and on the hills as well." "Oh dear," said Henry. "What can we do, sir?" "You will all need to puff carefully and make sure you don't go so fast," replied the Fat Controller. "High speed and snow do not mix." "Surely we can go a little fast," said Gordon. "Really useful engines are not slow coaches." "Safety comes first on my railway, Gordon," the Fat Controller put in. Gordon was surprised. He loved going fast, but the Fat Controller had made his mind up. "Henry, because you have worked so hard on the goods trains lately," the Fat Controller said to the green engine, "you can pull the express today." Henry was so happy he let out a cheerful toot of his whistle. Gordon couldn't believe what he had heard. "But sir," he cried, "the express is my train." "Not today, Gordon," boomed the Fat Controller. "I need you to take a goods train to Vicarstown station. They need supplies for the cafeteria and coal for the waiting rooms." But I," stuttered Gordon. "Come along please, Gordon," chuckled Henry. "Really useful engines do as they are told, remember." Gordon sulked crossly away. He felt insulted. "Take care when you're pulling the express today," said the Fat Controller to Henry. "The tracks will be slippery." "Yes, sir. I will, sir," agreed Henry. Henry wheezed steam and puffed out of the sheds. He went to fill his tender up with coal and water. The Fat Controller was right. The tracks were slippery. A lot of the engines were struggling to take care on the icy rails. They had to take care with their loads as they puffed along. But Gordon was not feeling happy as he made his way along the line with his goods train. He grumbled dreadfully. "A goods train! A goods train!" he huffed crossly. Further up the line he came towards Henry's tunnel. There were lots of snow on the roof, but Gordon was grumbling so much he didn't notice. He blew his whistle loudly as he rocketed through the tunnel. "Goods train coming through," he whistled. Suddenly there was a loud rumbling sound. No sooner had Gordon disappeared out the other side, the snow started to fall from the roof. It caused an avalanche. Before long, the entrance to the tunnel was blocked, and both lines were covered in snow. Meanwhile, Henry was puffing happily along the line with the express coaches. He was having a wonderful time. He didn't get to pull the express that much, so this felt like a nice change for him. "Pulling the express is a fun job indeed," he smiled happily. Henry was getting close to the tunnel. Then as they got closer, his driver put a hand on the brake. "Whoa, Henry!" he called. "Stop!" "What? Why?" asked Henry. But then he noticed the avalanche of snow covering the line up ahead. "Oh no!" he cried. "Look out!" The driver applied the brakes as hard as he could, but it was too late. Henry hit the pile of snow with a thud. Luckily no one was hurt, but poor Henry was stuck in the tunnel. His cabin tender could just be seen sticking out of the tunnel entrance. The guard carefully raced over to see what had happened. He was worried for Henry and his crew. "Are you all right?" he shouted. "We're all right," said Henry's driver, "but I think we're going to be stuck here for a bit." "Don't worry, Henry," called the fireman. "We'll have you dug out of here in no time." Henry heard what his fireman said. "I hope so," shivered Henry. But then there was another rumbling sound. The driver looked up. "Look out!" he shouted. "Another avalanche!" The crew got clear as another load of snow fell from the tunnel. When the snow dust cleared, Henry's cab was now nowhere to be seen. Only his tender could be seen sticking out of the snow. The guard spoke to the passengers to explain what had happened, while the driver went back to the signal box to telephone for help. "How are we going to get you out, Henry?" wanted the fireman. "We can't risk another avalanche coming down on you." Henry didn't say a word. He was starting to feel cold inside the tunnel. "I hope I'm not in here for too long," he thought to himself. On the other side of the tunnel, Arthur was coming down the other line with a load of vans. He was making a delivery to Knapford Station. He was enjoying his run on the main line. "It feels very different from pulling fish," he sighed. "I miss working on the fishing village line." Arthur knew he couldn't make any deliveries of fish while the line was closed, but he was pleased that he could be really useful elsewhere. He passed a snowy field where some farmers were talking and having hot drinks to keep them warm. "You're lucky to have a boiler to keep you warm," smiled his driver. "I have a flask of hot tomato soup to keep us warm." "Soup?" pondered Arthur. This made him puzzled. Then he came towards the tunnel and gave a toot of his whistle. When Henry heard this, he was scared. "Oh no!" he cried. "It's Arthur!" He wanted to blow his whistle or wish steam, but his fire had sadly gone out, so he had no steam left. Then Henry remembered his lamp was still on. Arthur carefully popped into the tunnel. He didn't notice Henry until he saw his lamp. "Stop!" called Henry. "Look out!" gasped Arthur. Arthur's driver applied the brakes and they stopped just in time. Arthur was very surprised. "Henry," he said, "what are you doing in here?" "I'm stuck in the avalanche," moaned Henry. "I can't get out. My cab is buried and my fire has gone out." "Oh dear," groaned Arthur's driver. "This means we can't get through." "What are we going to do now?" asked the fireman. Then Arthur suddenly remembered. "I know where we could get help," he grinned. He explained his plan to his driver. The driver agreed and then climbed back into the cab. He opens the regulator and Arthur carefully puffed back. "I'll be back soon, Henry," puffed Arthur. "Don't go anywhere, please." "That's all I can do," moaned Henry. Arthur puffed back up the line all the way back to the field. He remembered the farmers in the field he saw earlier. "I hope they're still there," he puffed to himself. They arrived back at the field and, to his delight, the farmers were still there. They were looking at their snow-covered field and were wondering what to do now. Arthur stopped by the fence and blew his whistle loudly. "Excuse me," he called to the farmers. "Help! Help!" The farmers were very surprised. They went over to see what was wrong. "What's the matter, Arthur?" asked one of the farmers. Arthur's driver explained what had happened to Henry and that they needed help to clear the snow. "We need shovels to help clear the snow away from Henry," explained the driver, "so that Henry can get clear of the tunnel." The farmers were happy to help. "We'll get our shovels right away," they smiled. The farmers returned with their shovels and wives. They boarded Arthur's brake van and Arthur puffed back to the tunnel. He was hoping Henry was all right. "I hope we're not too late," he thought. By now Henry was feeling very cold. His boiler was freezing and his axles felt like icicles. "I don't like this," he shivered. Then he heard a faint sound coming from behind. "Oh no," he groaned. "Another engine is coming." Another engine was coming, but it was Edward. He was pulling the works coach and trucks of shovels. When Edward arrived, he stopped behind the brake coach of the express. "Here we are, Henry," whistled Edward. "We're here to help." But Henry couldn't hear all of what Edward had said. The workmen walked over to the blocked tunnel entrance and started to clear away the snow. They had to be careful while doing so. They didn't want another snowfall coming down. The express coaches were uncoupled from Henry and Edward shunted them into a nearby siding out of the way. Whilst the workmen were clearing the snow, Arthur returned to the tunnel with the farmers. Henry was pleased to see him back. "I said I would be back with help," smiled Arthur. "We'll get you out of here soon." Henry smiled. The farmers climbed down from the brake van and started to dig away the snow from the inside of the tunnel. "Be careful," said the farmers' wives. "We don't want more snow to come down." The farmers agreed. Arthur's driver and fireman helped out too with the digging. It took a long time to clear away the snow, but soon Henry and his tender was free. A cable was fastened between Edward and Henry's tender. Sand was also put behind Edward's wheels to help him get a good grip on the rails. "Right, Edward," said his driver, "let's start pulling." Edward heaved and pulled as hard as he could. Slowly, Henry started to move out of the tunnel. Arthur watched as the rescue was underway. At last, Henry was out of the tunnel. He was very relieved. "Thank you, Edward," he smiled, "and thank you, everyone." Henry's fireman emptied his firebox and then started to make a new fire. Soon, Henry's fire was lit and he felt as warm as toast again. "That's better," wheezed Henry. "Thanks for your help," thanked Henry's driver to the farmers. "No problem," the farmers smiled. "I'm glad we could help, but we better get back to the farm." The workmen spoke to the farmers and their wives and agreed to give them a lift back on the works coach. Arthur changed tracks and pumped past Henry to continue his delivery. Edward collected Henry's express coaches and then shunted them behind Henry. Henry was coupled back onto the express. Then Henry's guard blew his whistle and Henry puffed away. He thanked Edward and the workmen as he puffed carefully through the tunnel. "I must make up for lost time," he puffed. "I must." "Take it steady, Henry," cautioned his driver. "The passengers know we will be late, but they understand what has happened and the trains waiting for us will still be there when we arrive." Henry hopes they would. It was a long trip to the next station, but at last Henry arrived at Vicarstown station, better late than never. "Sorry we're late," apologised Henry to the station master, who was waiting on the platform. "Not to worry, Henry," said the station master. "I heard all about your accident, and Murdoch and Stanley are here to look after your passengers." Murdoch and Stanley were pleased to see Henry safe and sound. "I'm sorry about your accidents," said Stanley. "It must have been terrible." "All this snow is nothing but trouble," wheezed Murdoch. "But be glad the accident wasn't your fault." "I wish I knew what happened," sighed Henry. "I guess you'll find out tonight," whistled Murdoch as he puffed away with his passenger train. And Murdoch was right. That night, the Fats Controller spoke severely to Gordon about the incident. "Gordon, you have caused confusion and delay," he scolded. "I told you to go carefully and not too fast, but your loud whistling caused an avalanche and poor Henry got stuck in it." Gordon felt very silly and very ashamed. "Just for that, you will be pulling Henry's goods trains for the rest of the week until you learn to be safe in the snow," the Fats Controller finished. "Oh, the indignity," moaned Gordon. "Come on now, Gordon," teased Henry. "That's no way to behave." All of the engines laughed, and Gordon felt very embarrassed. As the laughing and teasing went on, the Fat Controller went back to his car. "I wonder what Henry meant by that," he pondered.